It's interesting, isn't it? There's no straight lines in nature. Yet, most of the houses we build are boxes. So what happens when the right angle gets ditched for a house of curves?
Oh, yeah, he calls it bigfoot.
What is it? What am I going to see when it's done?
Like a foot.
A foot? Where every contour is a mathematical equation.
I can't figure out how to get the doors in upstairs that she wants. That's the problem.
With influences straight off a Parisian catwalk.
Sort of looks like a pleat in a dress.
In the wrong hands, this could spiral out of control. Because the thing about curves is, you can't see what's around the corner.
It's been a nightmare, believe me.
Experimenting and pushing the boundaries are two things that come naturally to Melbourne architect Tim Hill. While many architects fantasise about trailblazing, Tim's out there doing it, on small personal projects and big public ones.
So these sort of big shapes here are sort of the centre of these big spokes that sort of go out and connect other shapes.
The machinations of Melbourne's Federation Square, which he worked on, still inspires him. 3 hectares of cascading spaces designed as a cultural precinct, the hub of the CBD.
This building was done entirely in a factory and brought to site in really big pieces. You can see the bolts. We actually even designed a bolt for the atrium, so it's a one-off.
He was part of the team that brought these complex buildings to life. Buildings that appear as a series of disparate parts. Deconstructed geometric shapes of glass and steel. A world first in 3D modelling and construction. A project made for an architect with an appetite for breaking the mould.
Like all of these details, like these complex junctions, are actually then manufactured by hand. So it's this kind of really strange intersection between art and craft and computer technology, because you've got an industrial process coming together with a sort of an artisan process. And that's new, you know, like it hasn't been done before.
Which sets the tone for what Tim likes to do. And that's generally something pioneering. Like the first house he built for himself in Kensington, a gentrified inner suburb of Melbourne. A reimagined terrace house, minus long dark corridors. A perfect but tiny home Tim nicknamed the Lighthouse, that won awards and attention. None more so than from his biggest fan and partner, Victoria.
Living here really impressed upon me just how important architecture actually is and how much it influences you psychologically, just day by day. But just very beautiful and very warm and just designy. I don't know, I don't really have the vocabulary, you know. It's more a feeling. It's not something I can really explain, but to live in beauty really makes a difference.
But the Lighthouse was designed for 2. And now there's young Casper. So Tim's reaching into his architectural bag of tricks to pull out another surprise. Only this time, it'll be all about family and pragmatism.
You know, in our last house, there were only 2 doors and they were on the bathrooms. And in this house, I had a few, like, stipulations, like we need to have curtains in the bedrooms. None of this, like, architectural, like, you know, I want to be able to see the frames. None of that, you know, like I want carpet, I want curtains, I want comfort. And I want doors. I want doors, God damn it.
To include doors or not to include doors will be just one of Tim's design dilemmas. The other is what he plans to build in an area full of rows of semi-detached houses, so prominent in Kensington. And then there's the block itself, a small triangular slice of land on a corner. Hello. With an old double-storey brick stable nestled at the back.
Good,
Pleased to meet you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
This is an interesting setup because you've got this old remnant here, which is kind of a half falling down little old
And it is really
stable.
was falling down. So It was constructed in the 1880s. And
It was a
the
knock-up
front-
shed. It wasn't a properly built stables with, like, the bricks.
Yeah, you can see it's got a bit of
Yeah.
movement in this wall.
Yeah, so the front had fallen off and then rotated, so there were all these big cracks through it. So we've built a new timber superstructure up the inside to hold it all together.
Yeah.
And it'll be fine for another 140 years.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
you've got this old building, and I'm looking at a vacant site in front of me, so I'm assuming this is all on the one title.
That's correct, yeah. So we will have some separation between this and the building next door, but that's the 3-bedroom house we're going to live in eventually, and this is the 1-bedroom micro house that we will live in while we're building that.
What do you plan to do here? Is it
That's a
going to be
complete... no, that's a-
simpatico?
Not at all, they'll be opposites. So that'll be a modern building, completely different to this one. This is actually a heritage area. It's about to be made into a heritage overlay, so we had to keep this building no matter what. But the new building will contrast with it completely.
Tell me, what is it? What am I going to see when it's
It's
done?
like a foot.
A foot.
Yeah, this will be the old... This will be the joke about the woman who lives in the shoe.
Well, we're
So-
sneaker wearers
Yeah.
through and through, so...
So it's got... It's
No,
sort
I
of
want to hear Victoria tell
No,
me.
no, you go. Yeah, right.
What's the shape of a foot? Because it's on a triangle,
Yep.
and we wanted to maximise the space but also have garden, but it wasn't the kind of shaped block that you would do a traditional house on. Well, you could, there was one there, but only had 1 bedroom. So
Yes.
we need a 3-bedroom house. And so it just made sense to plonk it in the middle.
If you imagine the heel's closest to us,
Yes.
and then the balls of the foot are sort of towards the front. So there's 2 balls at the front, 1 at the back, and there's sort of 2 pods on top of the front and 1 at the back.
Yep.
So the way
Yep.
it's built is that the second floor are like little peas in the pod.
Or
Two
toes in the
two
shoe.
at the front.
Or toes in the shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's 1 at the back as well, which you probably
Wouldn't be a
want to
toe. Unless you had a scratch.
It's Achilles' heel.
Yeah.
Stamping itself into the terra firma, a foot-shaped slab will form the foundations of what will be a house of curves. A steel frame will trace the contours of the building, with a 2-storey timber superstructure that will reinforce the fluid shape within. Timber will be the hero inside, the walls, ceiling and joinery, with a central void that will saturate the lower level with natural light and highlight the timber grain. A recycled brick bench in the kitchen at the heel of the house will replicate the curvaceous exterior, while a dining area with banquette and a sunken lounge room with inbuilt seating will make up the toes. Batten timber stairs will lead to a bridge linking 2 front bedrooms and the main bathroom to the master and ensuite at the rear. The facade will be a mix of recycled brick and corrugated cladding, punctuated with irregular slot windows hooded in court-end frames for shade. Like a piece of art, this will be a house to be enjoyed from all sides. A house Tim plans to sculpt for 600 grand. So, what builder have you managed to shackle to do this,
Well-
quite challenging building?
So I'm doing it. I'm building it.
You're building it as well?
So I'm responsible, but somebody else is doing most of the work. Brian Donnelly is the foreman, I guess you'd
Okay,
call him,
so
and
you-
he's essentially operating as the builder. He's from Ireland. He originally a chippy, but he can do just about everything. So he's happy to concrete, he's
That's a
happy
bonus,
to
isn't
plaster,
it?
he's
He's
happy
great.
to... Yeah, he's
Yeah.
So
happy to
great.
tile.
Yeah,
happy to
he's
do
great.
everything.
And Victoria, will you be involved? I mean, obviously you've got a school base here. Are you involved with the process? What will you be doing during all this?
I just do what I'm told. Tim says, can you call the plumber and get him to bring a bloody-blah? And so that's what I do. I mean, I'm running the family. I run the house.
Yep.
Whatnot.
Basically, I can't do any of that.
Yeah. Tim is just like works all day, comes home, works all through till midnight, and gets up and does it again. So I do everything else. So I'm support.
Well,
around
you're the
everything that has to
backstop.
happen. Yeah,
You wouldn't-
I'm
couldn't-
the great woman behind the great man.
While Tim is adamant that the constraints of the block created this very unusual footprint, I think he steered the design of this house to feature the hardest thing to get right in building: curves. Something his Irish builder Brian is discovering. He's been lumped with the job of nutting out the set out.
There isn't a straight wall. Usually in a standard house, you can go off a grid line. It's pretty foolproof, really. Set up a few reference points here and there, but this one, nah, I don't have that facility. So it's been a nightmare, believe me.
Getting the accuracy of the curves is a surprisingly rudimentary process. using string lines to measure every point in every curve, bit by bit.
P.
That's a tangent point there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's P over this side. I've that line through. I've checked that measurement there.
Right.
It's a labour-intensive process that takes patience and skill.
That should be the edge of the wall.
And Brian's not giving up any trade secrets.
That takes years' experience. And if I was to tell you that, I'd have to kill you.
And a rainbow bus. Look, there's Mistress Mouse again. This time she's towing a tow truck.
Like the layout, the steel frame also has to be millimetre specific. If the measurements are out by a fraction, Tim's carefully calibrated pre-cut frame won't fit. So he's taking the most cost-effective and foolproof path and doing the drawings himself.
I started off thinking it was a much smaller job than it's turned out to be. There'll probably be about between 90 and probably 120 drawings, depending on how it actually ends up.
By creating his own computer model and drawings, it's saving them $30,000. But Tim's chasing streamlined, continuous steel beams, and they come with a hefty price tag. It takes 4 long weeks to finish the layout. Hydronic heating pipes snaking through the network of steel and mesh, all firmly braced within the timber formwork. Bigfoot, as they've dubbed it, is as ready as it'll ever be for the concrete pour.
We have it all marked out. We've checked it. We've rechecked it again. I've got a new crew in today just to give us a hand with the pour. And I've left them to check me also. And thank God everything's all right.
Working with curves like these and a material that sets fast is risky business. If the formwork buckles under the weight of the concrete, it'll be panic stations.
If things can go wrong, it's always quite a tense moment because a lot of things happen in a very short space of time.
What they don't want is the concrete spilling out and ruining the footprint they've spent so long refining. It'd be like adding bunions or corns or a spur on a heel. It has to be perfect.
Yeah, the vibrator puts too much, it moves the concrete too much, so it puts more strain on the formwork.
By day's end, Brian can breathe easy. Tim's got what he ordered, a big foot set in concrete.
Well, yeah, he calls it Bigfoot. Well, my feet's been around it long enough now, so my feet are definitely big from it. Big and sore.
There aren't too many people with the confidence to do what Tim's taken on here, because curves are just so difficult to do well. The first part of this wonderful curvilinear freeform building is simply in 2 dimensions. That is, it's a concrete slab set down into the ground, which is complex enough because there's not one straight line in the outside form of this thing. And it's much like me putting my foot into the sand, and it leaves this wonderfully natural profile. But as this form grows out of the ground, it gets exponentially more difficult. And his preferred building material of choice, steel, just doesn't want to bend. Which begs the question, with a building full of so many gentle curves, how do you emulate something as naturally beautiful as this? Tim Hill's footprint is clearly visible on his irregular block in Melbourne's inner city Kensington. So far, the foot-shaped slab is all he has to show for hundreds of hours he's poured into perfecting the drawings. It seems no one wants to build his curvaceous steel frame.
I've just been trying to get a steel contractor to take the job on. So the problem's been that I did a really well-developed set of drawings, but all that meant is the big guys gave us some really high costing. So I went to a mixture of small and big companies, and the big companies basically didn't want to touch it or would touch it if they charged an excessive fee, basically.
And I said to Tim, you know, do you just want to stick a fork in your eye over that? And he's like, well, now I understand it. So I guess you just got to look bigger picture. I mean, there's so much ahead of us still. You can't have a crisis yet, you know?
With quotes as high as 150,000, that's almost double his budget, Tim's having to rethink the whole steel thing. There's no doubt about it. Curves cost. And steel curves cost a heap more.
So in the end, yeah, the industry can do these very precise curves. Costs a bomb though. You have to use an induction steel bending method. And what we found is that when we got down to a price that we sort of would consider, we weren't getting the accuracy. So there's no point in doing it anymore. So you may as well go back to minimising the amount of steel and building as much as you can in timber, because you get the same level of precision, but it's a much cheaper construction method.
While Tim negotiates his way through other options, he wants to convince Victoria that even with the problems, the curvy form he's in love with is worth the angst. And what better way than to see what she'll be living in miniature, as a 3D printout.
You can just see the outline of it, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the outline of it. And whilst it's coming out of here, it's actually quite fragile because it's just loosely bound powder.
It's really like an archaeological excavation,
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're really uncovering it.
Need a little brush.
Yeah.
It's a perfect opportunity to get a whole new perspective, inside and out, from heel to toe.
Oh, that's cool. Because I feel like I look at it a lot from the stables, you know, so I have this view that's the stables' eye view of the place. When I visualise it, I see it from that end, because we're living there, so it's really actually great to see it from the front.
As for finicky details like windows and doors, Tim's number one client is just going to have to use her imagination.
No doors that I can see. They're meant to be upstairs.
Well, there were 3 doors upstairs and 3 doors downstairs.
Oh, yeah, going outside.
And for Tim, who's more accustomed to building models out of cardboard, this robotic version will satisfy his curiosity about how his prototype shapes up.
I think I'll go with this.
Oh, luckily.
Faced with outrageous costs for curved beams, Tim's resigned to the fact that his hybrid version of steel and timber is the only way forward.
I can't afford a bent thing, as it turns out, so what they've done is they've just chopped it up into a series of segments and welded it back together, so it's an approximation of a curve. So the rest of the curve comes from pieces of timber that are added to it that are more precise and are shaped into the curve. So it's just a kind of a coarse curve, an approximate curve.
Tim's steel timber hybrid solution is a lot more demanding of the trades. They have to work much closer together. The steel, timber and brickwork all need to dovetail to achieve the meticulous curves he's chasing.
Drop it down, retie it.
The steel posts and beams will be bolted and welded together to reveal the shape of things to come. Curves that are mirrored in the brickwork growing out of the ground. Every curve follows a timber template cut to millimetre precision. It's no picnic for Brian, who's been anointed keeper of the curves.
We've cut the templates for the guys, but that's good in the perfect world, but bricks aren't perfect. I know bricklayers, but he's done a great job anyway, but yeah, so it's what I call a fucking headache, yeah.
When I finally get back to visit Tim and Victoria, the second level's up. Even in its skeleton state, it stands out, in a street brimming with square terraces on square blocks.
And there's quite a lot of curving going on inside that I can start to pick, as well as the outside.
That's right, yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of dynamic. I was kind of thinking the outside would be the main statement.
Sort of felt like we had to follow it through from outside to inside. So I didn't want the outside and the inside to look like different houses or different projects.
It feels really harmonious. It feels like it'll be such a nice space to live in.
Yeah.
So circular.
It's so circular. And so why... what makes it harmonious? Is it the softness of the building?
Yeah.
Is that what you're feeling?
Yeah, it'll just feel, like, easy to move through, I guess.
And there's quite a lot of timber in it. I'm actually surprised you've been able to craft such a complex shape out of timber. The boys seem to be sawing and nailing, you know, and it all seems to be taking shape.
We spend a long time agonising over how much steel and how much timber would be. We ended up with a lot more timber than we expected at the beginning. And it's been really good because they've been able to adjust it as they go, in a way, you know, so it's not as critical as the steel. So it's a lot more forgiving to work with.
Yep. But how's it impacting with labour, you know, because it's a lot more complex to have to make up the curves?
We have been pleasantly surprised by that.
We thought it would take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And the steel was going to be more expensive, so it was in the budget to have more steel anyway.
So it's gone to labour for the timber.
But the labour's been quicker than we thought. So we're running ahead of program, which is a nice surprise too.
Over budget, but under time.
Can't have everything.
No.
Tim's ardent pursuit of the perfect curve against the odds is admirable. But what I really want to know is, will it be the right fit for the family? Because living in a roundhouse takes a whole new style of living. For starters, there's the furniture.
And how's it going to be to live in with all these shapes, do you think? You know, just in terms of where you put things in the rooms and how they relate. I mean, look at the spot behind you. What the hell's going on there?
I don't
what are you
know.
putting in that thing there?
I know, it's a good question. We'll just have to work it out, I guess, as we go through. We haven't got the cabinetry sorted yet, really. It's just more once, you know, the cladding is up, we'll get a better idea of the spaces again, I think, when you have walls and windows, and then where best to put a desk. I mean, we've got vague ideas. You know, you need storage.
Yep.
We're just going to have to roll with it. I mean, there are limitations because of the inside shapes. Obviously, there's a lot of inbuilt furniture and stuff like that. So I don't know how well you can build an inbuilt chest of drawers. Can you even, on a curve, can you even do that? I don't.
Don't ask me.
It'll just be some crazy newfangled thing. But I guess we just have to work it out as we go along.
It's interesting, isn't it, that whole kind of journey you're going on? You know, I'm looking at the walls and going, where do you hang something on the walls when it's all kind of curving? And, you know, how do you plan all that?
Yeah, look, I'd like to be able to hang up art and stuff, but, I mean, we just have to roll with it.
Victoria's got the right approach. They're committed to their curvy house with all its nuances. It's already making an impression from the street, inviting curiosity as it ripples around its corner location. But then, rounded edges do that. They lure you from one curve to see what's around the next. And this house offers one very big hook.
You know, this is a typical Melbourne street, where all the buildings line up politely in a row and have all the money spent on the front couple of metres of the building. And they all carefully follow the boundaries of each of their individual properties. But this building has a completely new dynamic. It breaks free of its title boundaries and has no front, no back, no sides. In fact, I'm not even sure where the front door is. This is a totally new prototype. This is architecture in the round.
And so the window would be in here or in here?
Well, it's got to be in there.
Yeah, right. You wouldn't put like windows through here?
No, that's the gutter.
Right.
They're the only chances.
As an architect, you have to be adaptive and inventive, and Tim is both. He's always looking for other ways of doing things. This time, he's reassessing the entire exterior cladding. No question, it has to be steel, but he's trading in the corrugated profile for something, well, something more random.
Sort of the appearance is that it looks like a pleat. So instead of it looking like, and it'd be really interesting to see how it actually turns out, but in the computer it sort of looks like a pleat in a dress.
Tim's description of the cladding has got me intrigued.
You know,
Nice for
he's
him.
down there taking photos of it.
Yeah.
I'm expecting to meet him in a steel factory, but apparently the answer lies in a fabric warehouse.
And so was it the idea come from, I don't know, looking at some fabric that was pleated, like a woman's skirt or a kilt or something?
Not really. It sort of came originally from it was a kind of a question, which is sort of when you have a building that's a strange shape and there are a lot of curves in the building, how do How do you identify something that will work for the facade that doesn't look like it's got a seam? You know, so most of the stuff that we put on buildings is made up of rectangles.
Yeah,
Occasionally we do something that's made of triangles, but there aren't many materials that will actually sort of seamlessly run around.
Yeah. And pleating can take many different forms, can't it? It can be like a tiny little zigzag to something that's quite...
that's right, yeah.
You know, so there's a scale issue there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm looking at all this beautiful texture behind it.
Yeah, you see all the different textures that you could have chosen, you know, so
Yeah.
there's the really fine stuff and then there's the quite
look at
deep
that
stuff.
one. Yeah, because that one's...
And this looks like it's a continuous surface, whereas this one's much more about how the fold runs in and out. And so you have to find the right scale for the building. I mean, the way I did it was I just sort of experimented with different shapes until I found one that I thought made the pleat clear. So it wasn't too much pleat, it wasn't too much the form of the building. It was something in between that did both.
I love the way Tim's running rogue and taking risks. I mean, the whole idea of a concertina exterior that will zigzag around the building is intoxicating. But steel is a long way from satin. So if this steel skin he's concocting doesn't work, it'll be curtains. Architect Tim Hill has a thing for doing things differently. And today is the culmination of his adventure into curves. His foot-shaped house in inner-city Melbourne is in the process of being dressed.
It's a folded metal sheet which zigzags at approximately 45 degrees to make triangles all the way around, and it looks like a pleated fabric. So it's sort of, it looks like a curtain or it looks like a piece of linen. It doesn't really look like metal cladding.
It's a romantic image, but the reality is the antithesis of working with flowing fabric. Brian and the build team are dealing with very sharp, 3-metre-long folded metal sheets that will wrap around the entire building. And most of them have to be trimmed to fit. It's a job that should come with danger money.
Is this your blood, Joe?
Yeah, cut myself yesterday.
Yeah, right. This is blood, sweat and tears.
Aware of the casualties his specialty pleats are waging on the trades, Tim's under no illusion about how difficult it is to manoeuvre these elongated weapons.
Yep.
And fixing them is proving to be just as complex. Keeping the accordion-like folds even from top to bottom.
Never used this before, so it's new to me as well. New to Tim, new to Brian, new to me, so it's challenging in itself. Got to slide all the way to you.
Pleats might equal pain for the tradies, but there's more grief to come with the corten box frames that make up the handful of right angles in the entire building.
So the hoods are meant to contrast, so it's like a piece of the outside is protruding from the inside to the outside. They're about creating privacy and shade and preventing overlooking from the upper levels. So they're doing a number of things. They're sort of functional, but they're also, there's a bit of architectural in there as well.
The problem is there's no instruction manual on how to fit them.
I only see the base. This is probably the worst one out of the whole lot.
This is the biggest.
Yeah, on the big curve.
Yeah.
It's a tricky business trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Okay, now, man.
And this is one very big peg positioned right on the big toe.
Tim should have thought about making these hoods curved. Would have been easier for us.
There's no arguing that integrating multiple layers and textures with a twist of geometry into a building the shape of a foot is crazy hard.
Yeah, that looks good.
Ah, it looks like shit, man.
I have my shade cloth, which is my psychological barrier between me and the build.
While Tim's busy shaping the new house, Victoria's been carving her own little oasis from their makeshift home on site.
It's fun. It's so fun to have garden to play in, you know. So often when you live in a city, you just don't have that kind of house, or when you rent, you know, you don't really care, or... Catch this time? Oh, it's small, but we can stay here indefinitely. We're on site. We could be paying rent somewhere and be living much further away, and that would be much more stressful for us as a family unit as well, because Tim's pretty much just working 2 jobs. You know, he does his day job and he comes home and he works on the house most nights and most weekends. So it's very, very compressing. You know, we both feel very compressed, but we don't fight because there's no time, because he's working. So it's okay.
The old stable will, in time, become a guest house for the Rallies. A little piece of brick history, rubbing shoulders with its new cousin, wearing shiny white armour.
It's much less feminine than I thought it would look, but I think that's probably good. You don't really want to live in a skirt. Some people might. But in this instance, no, I think it's the right balance. I think he's really struck the right balance with it.
With the house now dressed, Tim can get stuck into the interior. That, by all accounts, will be even more complicated than the exterior. Which means, you guessed it, more curves from the master craftsman.
It's a lot more exacting and demanding, and a lot more of the work is work that Brian has to do on his own because nobody else can do it.
Plus, Tim still has some unfinished business.
I can't figure out how to get the doors in upstairs that she wants. That's the problem. I'm not really working my way through it very well. I'm trying. Yeah.
Everything inside this house will mirror the theme of the outside, only tenfold, with even more twists and turns. And just to make things really interesting, which is just the way Tim likes it, no two are the same.
You know, Tim's having a real crack here, trying to design something which is no doubt groundbreaking, but it's complex. You know, it's got curve intersecting with another curve, intersecting with another curve. And that's okay to draw in your office on a computer, but out here in the field, trying to assemble it is very difficult. And this is just the outside. What he's got planned inside is even more convoluted and more complex. So what it comes down to is him trying to find someone with the skill that can read between the lines, that can interpret the design intent and make this happen, not through looking at plans, but relying on skilled craftsmen's hands. That's the way this is going to happen.
And right on cue, the man with that skill is tackling yet another of Tim's curveballs. Tim's decided to risk veneer-faced MDF on the walls. It works well on the straights, but it's a very fine, inflexible material that can easily split if pushed too far. So Brian's taking out extra insurance and trussing up the sheets in corset-style straps in the hope they'll bend to his will.
Each day I sort of tweak it a bit more, so I'm over-exaggerating the curve, just to make sure there's not as much pressure when it goes on the wall.
You can't draw everything, especially in a building like this that's complicated, so you arrive at these points where you're not really sure what to do. And so Brian is then a kind of, I can do it this way. It's like he's almost competitive with the job. So the job challenges him and he challenges the job back.
Brian seems to have an answer to everything. While Tim keeps the ideas coming, it's a case of what came first, the architect who keeps raising the bar or the builder who keeps jumping higher.
We'll have to get this one right.
The veneer-faced MDF is only 6mm thin. So if this corner panel goes wrong, it'll go horribly wrong by splitting or popping off the wall. So Brian's making sure this baby isn't going anywhere.
That's the one he shot.
And to make extra sure it stays where it should, he's putting hundreds of screws into the wall. It's a process he'll repeat over and over for every curve in the house, each trickier than the last.
Well, the glass is arriving soon, so yeah, bit of pressure on me, I suppose, because I'm the one that's measured it, made the frames, I've given the radiuses. Okay, I'll hold that. Yep.
Tim could have gone the easy path, flat glass in faceted frames. So I'm rapt to see the windows are in step with the rest of the building.
So thick.
And as for Brian, well, fitting curved windows is just another hurdle on a very long obstacle course.
Yeah, today's the moment of truth. Right, mate.
Pushing people, including himself, has enabled Tim to achieve things beyond the mundane and beyond what his modest budget would normally allow. But as the finish line gets closer, practical necessities rear their head.
We're going to be short in storage, for sure. The practicality element suddenly is visible, and I'm like, well, we need to put these things somewhere. So now, what do you think, architect?
This is a perfect example of the architect at play. Now it's time for the pragmatist to weigh in.
I just think that at a certain point, Tim can't think through to those micro details, and that's not his thing is the aesthetic, right? It just feels like it puts more pressure on him, and I didn't want to put more pressure on us for that sort of stuff. So I let him build his house, which I will live in, which will be great, and then I got to put some hanger things up.
When I first met architect Tim Hill 18 months ago, I knew he was always going to produce something out of the ordinary. Something challenging and new. Something that would spark interest and raise questions. From the foot-shaped slab to the concertina facade,
Hey, Tim.
G'day, Peter. How you going?
this house was destined to be different.
Well done.
Thank you.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's fantastic when the light's out, isn't it?
Oh, how's the light
Sunshine.
shimmering off that metal? And the way it carves the profile on this beautiful morning blue sky is extraordinary.
It looks like it's moving all the time.
Yeah.
And that was a surprise to me. So as soon as it appeared, I thought, oh, it's always got this movement about it. A friend of mine who was an architect said it still looks like somebody's sketched it. So it hasn't actually solidified into a built form. It
Yeah,
looks
still
like
snaking around on
yeah,
your
still
block.
moving around, yeah.
And Victoria, do you feel like this is your home now?
I love it. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful. It's beautiful on the outside. It's beautiful on the inside. It's great. I'm really happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All these curves on the outside look amazing. Can't wait to see the way it all translates inside.
Let's have a look.
Like some sort of curvaceous object wrapped in fabric, this tiny but shapely house on a corner makes one big fashion statement, telling its own story alongside its more established Victorian counterparts.
So here we are.
And inside is just as audacious. One large, inviting space made up of curves going in all directions, bound by caramel-coloured timbers. It's soft and rich and hugs you in its warmth.
This seems to me like there's a lot of energy right here.
To me, this is our great medieval hall. You know, with our big void and all the spaces open and visible, and it has a very harmonious feel to it. And even though we're in inner city and we're on the train line, there's a lot going on the street, somehow it's got this real sort of soft feeling about it.
We feel very protected in here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is about the space, whether it's all these curves sort of coming together in this one kind of area, kind of like a vortex. There's some sort of purity about this space. I'm not exactly hard to put my finger on it, really.
Well, there's nowhere where it starts and stops. You know, the curves just move and move and move, and nothing stops in the space.
Yeah, it was sort of this thing where, because it's a triangle, nothing balances. So everything about it's asymmetric, but it still feels quite settled to me. So it sort of feels like it's been sorted out.
Tim's right. Nothing here is at odds with itself. But I'm not sure how to explain the overall vibe. Clearly, it is about the rounded edges. The snaking form draws your eye from one thing to the next. It creates a calm continuum. And maybe that's just it.
What's also nice is that it sort of settles into four quite different spaces down here. So kitchen, lounge room, dining area, and then we actually use this void space quite a lot, so it's not ornamental. The big sort of rug in the middle is where Casper's toys end up, and we sort of sit with him down on the floor, and then it opens up there into the garden. So everything is kind of connected in sort of quite a fluid way, and that's how we sort of occupy the house. Even though the zones are specific, they blend together.
You can walk onto the sofa.
That's pretty cute.
Just walk straight onto it.
I love the conversation pit. That's so cool, and you can just step straight onto it.
Yeah, no, it's
What
good.
a tactile blast this is.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Casper
awesome.
just runs over there, straight over to watch the TV. No, it's really, yeah, it all works really well.
It's interesting moving through a curved interior simply because it flows. And cleverly, the raw materials and natural colours Tim's chosen to pull it all together work so well in blending every surface, so nothing jars.
So you've had a go at curving everything in the house, even the kitchen bench.
Yeah, had to.
Well,
Otherwise
how-
it didn't fit in the space.
But how difficult was that? You curved the brickwork, the concrete, just everything.
Brickwork was I didn't understand this. Like, these are all cut, all these bricks, they're all cut into sort of segments of the curve, and that surprised me. So we ended up with all of these off-cut bricks.
It's actually a beautiful pattern.
This is
great.
my favourite part, actually, of the whole house.
Is that right?
I love this. It's like total arts and crafts movement.
You want to get your hands on it,
Yeah,
don't you?
it's so beautiful. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Tim's gone for the no furniture approach, apart from the odd freestanding piece. But then, what are the options in rooms with no edges?
In terms of a seating configuration, you've committed to something that's unable to be reconfigured. I mean, this is here for good.
Yeah, but you couldn't put a square table in here. It
You
would have
can't
been
fit
ridiculous.
another one in anyway.
It's it's just the best resolution for the space, I think.
And, you know, we had some friends around on the weekend and they own a small boat, and they said immediately, oh, this is exactly like a boat dining area. And they're all like this because they fit into these round sort of hulls, and you have to make the best use of the space. So they all use banquettes. So that was kind of what we were thinking about a bit with a lot of the bespoke furniture as well. You could use things that aren't always in buildings. You can use them in, you know, examples that are on boats.
True,
Because they work really well into curved spaces.
I rather like the analogy of being on a boat. There is a seafaring feel, with the soft shapes and blonde timbers also beautifully detailed. Shapes that still have me in awe. I mean, the ceiling is like a jigsaw puzzle.
What's evident to me here is the craft that's gone into it. Everywhere I look, I think someone's had to build that, you know?
I know, and Brian has done an absolutely outstanding job just about everywhere you look. I mean, even from this, I mean, you know, he's kind of followed the curve perfectly there. They're all solid timber. You look at every single joint, like all of these, even so the little fragments over there, everything's perfect. And it's just, you just have to think, gosh, how did he do it? No, you know, I look at it and go, how did he do it? I mean, just an outstanding effort.
Yeah, thank God you found him.
Exactly, yeah. Couldn't have done it without him.
Brian brought the ship home to harbour, connecting with Tim on a level that produced something very special. This is one of the most finely honed houses I've seen.
A curved house is not an easy house to build.
Yeah, it's much easier to draw a curve than build it. And there are lots of little knock-ons, so many more than I thought. But it knocks on through all the furniture, through all the walls. And then you get things like the sloping ceiling where they used to be radiuses and now there are ellipses on the corners. And yeah, it just goes on forever. Yeah, it's really difficult.
Victoria, watching Tim go through that, trying to run his practice, he's got a young family, and build the house of curves, did that take a toll?
The house of curves, yes. Well, that was just the hardest part. If there was a hard part about the build, that's what it was. It was the lack of family time and Tim just doing night after night after night and weekends and weekends. I mean, you just worked nights and weekends for 18 months, pretty much. I know I was contributing to the family and in my own way, but not being able to contribute to that workload, even though I had my own workload going on, I sort of felt a bit sort of like,
Yeah, but the load came on.
helpless at times with that stuff that you'd be struggling with.
Yeah,
like,
but
I've
you
got to
had
go and draw something now and it's going to take me 4 hours. And I'd be like, I'll just watch something on my iPad then.
No, but that's not true, actually, because you were picking up the load that I would have
Yeah,
been
sure.
doing as well.
Don't leave
So
the
it was
family
hard
one.
on you too.
Absolutely. Yeah, but that was the hard part. But maybe that's just, regardless of having curves or whatever, Tim would always have made. We always would have been a build that was complex because he wants to stretch himself, curves, whatever it would have been. It was always going to be that, I guess.
Tim's mission of being true to his creative self and building the perfect family home did put him to the test. But he's found the balance. The openness of the ground level plays beautifully alongside the segregation of the rooms upstairs. There's a little more privacy up here, but it's just so compatible with the rest of the house.
And Victoria, when we started this, you said you wanted carpet.
Check.
You got a little bit here.
Yeah.
Curtains, can't see much of that at all.
Check. Downstairs.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
There's no doors. You wanted doors.
There might be a door.
So you have got doors.
There might be a door. Now you see it?
Ah, smart. So you've recessed them into the walls.
Yeah,
Flush.
so when the doors open, you can't see it. It's just concealed.
Nice trick.
So we still wanted some spaces like these ones to feel open, and that's the nicest way to do it, but to allow guests to have some privacy, because this is our sort of guest room.
But a streamlined detail.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
It just becomes part of the wall.
Just like one of the panels.
Nice. Nice. It's the Maxwell Smart.
That's right.
Sort of-
The phone shoe
It's
door.
a phone shoe door.
There are so many analogies that can be made with this house. From footprints and ship hulls to fashion meets the built form. But what's outstanding is that it dared to be different. It's truly one of a kind.
I never wanted to be the architect who lived in that house, you know, that weird house at the end of the street or something like that. And I also didn't want to be the architect who lived in a house that nobody thought was architectural. So somehow you have to find a way in between that means that you're proud of where you live and what you live says something about you.
You didn't take on this style of building to save money, obviously, because, I mean, it's more complex than most people would imagine. Did it push your budget?
Yeah, completely. So we anticipated spending something around $650 for the home, and I think we ended up spending closer to $720. I think the value for money was outstanding. Like, I think if we'd tendered it on the open market, it would have been considerably more expensive.
And not as well done. Brian is amazing.
Yeah.
Like his skill, like I feel like we got it cheap, actually, for the skill that he brought to every piece of timber, every angle, for the skill, what we have.
And how much different do you think it is living in this environment to a house that's rectilinear, or square?
I don't know if it's got anything to do with square or round, but more just living in a building that has had education and thought behind it. It really changes how you feel in your day-to-day life. Like, architecture matters. Before I lived with an architect and lived in an architecture design house, I kind of would have thought, like, nah, that's kind of for snobs, maybe, you know? But actually, I feel that how you live and the spaces you live in, it matters. So I feel fortunate, yeah.
You know, what I love about this building is that it challenges every notion of what a little house can be. There's no front entrance, there's no back door, there's no front yard, there's no driveway. And the building itself is kind of scaleless, you know. You can't identify how big things are. And it's that distortion of reality, I think, makes it stand out as something that's really, really intriguing. And I just hope that others engage in the delight in this building, because there's not many people who have the courage to reinvent from first principles up a building which is so difficult to make. I'd love to live in it. How good's that?